Hello everyone, Ben DiBono here, talking to you today about question 3 of the Summa, the simplicity of God. If you've been tracking with Thomas Aquinas so far, excellent job. This is where things get very complicated. I don't think it's going to take nearly as much time to explain as the 5 proofs did, but there's some complex terms, there's some really key ideas in this question especially that are going to pertain to our entire understanding of God throughout the Summa. So this is going to be really important. We are going to go through Articles 1 through 4 of question 3 today, and then next time Articles 5 through 8. So let's not waste any time. Let's dive right in. I actually did remember to start the screen capture today, so let's get going and dive into question 3. Let's go. Alright, so we are here. Summa Theologica Complete Outline. Prima pars, as always, well, not as always, at least for now, treatise on the one God. We have finished the first part of the treatise, whether God exists. That is only question 2. Questions 3 through 13, we will be in how God exists. Questions 3 through 11 of that are going to concern the divine essence. You might also hear that referred to as the divine attributes sometimes. What do we mean when we say the word God? Because you remember in question 2, we established that there is such a being as God, but only in a very nominal sense. We don't have any specifics really besides the fact that there must be a being who meets the requirements laid out in the 5 proofs of question 2, and beyond that we can't say anything about him at this point. So, question 3 gets into the divine attributes, and the most fundamental of the divine attributes is the simplicity of God. This is going to be foundational for everything else we talk about in the attributes, everything else we talk about in this treatise, and especially for helping us avoid heresy when we get into the subject of the Trinity. Alright, so within question 3, we'll get to the definitions in just a second. We're going to consider whether God is a body, whether God is composed of matter and form, in other words, is he a composite being, whether God is the same as his essence or nature, whether essence and existence are the same in God, and that's what we'll cover today. Then next time, whether God is contained in a genus, whether in God there are any accidents, whether God is altogether simple, whether God enters into composition with other things. All right, a number of really key terms. First, essence, nature, and substance are all really kind of talking about the same thing. What these 3 terms are talking about is what a being is at its very, very core. You know, so that which a thing is by substance or accident. We probably even say just substance there, you know, because as we get into the accidents, we move away from essence and into individuality. So maybe I'll go ahead and modify that now. Alright, nature, the basic aspect of a thing, very similar to essence, and then substance, the foundation of a thing or being, the common factor of a species or genus. So if we're talking about human beings, the essence of or nature or substance of a human is not anything that is specific to you or me, but it is the common foundation for all humanity, regardless of individual differences. Then when we get into suppositum, then we're talking about an individual substance. So my individual factors, your individual factors as a human being, those are what make us individual suppositums. But our core shared nature, our core shared substance or essence as a human, is not something individual to us, but it's something that is common to all that we could rightly call human beings. Alright, then we have form and matter. Now, these are related to Aristotle's 4 causes. I'm not going to go very much into that at all. If you have no clue what the 4 causes are, I would encourage you to go look that up. I put a link up on the Facebook page for reading the Summa. That's a good place to get started. But the 4 causes are the formal cause, the efficient cause, the material cause, and the final cause. The final cause is why is something created. The efficient cause is how it is created. In this question, we are concerned about these two, form and matter. So form, according to the St. Thomas lexicon, the actualizing principle that makes a thing to be what it is. Matter, that from which something arises. So in other words, and here I have another mistake, that shouldn't be substance, the material. So form is the characteristics of something. Matter is the material of something. Form is Aristotle's formal cause. Matter pertains to Aristotle's material cause. So form is going to ask, what are the substantive characteristics? What is the essence of something? Matter is going to ask, what is that thing made out of? Now, one of the questions Aristotle asks is it possible to have a being that exists with only form or with only matter? One of the conclusions he reaches is that it is possible to have a being that exists purely as form, but without matter, and that being must, by definition, be called God. And that's what we're going to prove in the subsequent articles. So that's a very quick overview. If those aren't clear, stop, reread through what I wrote on the outline. Do a little reading on your own, Google them, make sure you understand at least at a basic level what these terms are before you move on, okay? Because I'm going to assume a basic knowledge of those definitions from here on out, all right? So, those are our key definitions, at least for these first 4 articles. We may have some additional ones through articles 5 through 8. Article 1, whether God is a body. Now, this might seem very obvious to us who don't think of God as a physical being. But even if the conclusion is obvious, even if we're not in doubt here, we still need to understand why. Why do we say that God is not a body? Why isn't God physical? Why do we believe in the God of Christianity rather than the God of ancient Greece? Why don't we worship a god like Zeus, who does have a body and does exist in the physical realm? And this is very important too, because, and I hate to pick on Dawkins again, but when somebody like Richard Dawkins comes out and says, well, you don't believe in Zeus, you don't believe in Thor, I'm just like you, except I believe in one less God than everybody else. Well, that's not true, because we reject that category of what is called gods in favor of the non-material monotheistic God of the monotheistic faiths. And there's a good reason for doing so. So, again, it's a nice soundbite by Richard Dawkins, but unfortunately he's being fairly intellectually dishonest when he says that. And as we explore these arguments, we'll understand why. So what are our objections? Well, the objections are, and I'm not going to go through these individually, there's 5 of them, and they're all quotations from Scripture. That God exists in 3 dimensions, he has a figure, he has corporeal parts, posture, he's localized. And all of these we'll see are going to be answered in pretty much the same way, that when Scripture is using those terms for God, when it says God sits, when it says the arms of God or the eyes of God, it's speaking metaphorically, which we proved in question 1, article 9, is appropriate for Scripture to do. All right, argument from authority, John 4:24. God is spirit, and you shall worship him in spirit and in truth. So says Jesus to the woman at the well. All right, then the argument. This argument is going to utilize the via negativa, the negative way. We are proving something about God by ruling out something. In this case, we are ruling out the existence of him having a physical form. So no body moves unless it is, and that's no body, not nobody, okay? No body, no physical body moves unless it is set in motion. It has been shown God is the unmoved mover, therefore he is not a body. Everybody exists in potentiality. It is shown that God is the first being, is pure actuality, that's proof 1. Therefore, he is not a body. Then finally, God is the noblest being, and the noblest being because it cannot be a body, because bodies have aspects of immobility. In other words, bodies have the potential of being dead. And to be alive is more noble than to be dead. So if God has the body, he is a body, he has a potential of being dead, and therefore he is not the noblest being. All right. Article 2 is going to say something very similar. Whether God is composed of matter and form. We're really coming at the same issue, but from a different direction. Objections. Whatever has a soul is composed of matter and form. Scripture says God has a soul. Scripture also says God has emotions such as joy and anger, and those come from composite beings. Matter is what individualizes us. It is what takes us from being pure essence to a suppositum. God is individualized more than we are, and therefore he must be composed of matter. Argument from authority, well, we just kind of refer back to what we said in the previous article. We already rejected that God has a body, and to have matter and form is to have a body. Now, there's also this interesting note, and there is a treatise on the angels a little later on, but just in case this question arises, well, what about the angels? Because they're individual. We're going to find that they're not individual in the way that God is individual. They don't have matter to individualize them, so how can there be more than one angel? Well, the answer St. Thomas is going to give is that each angel is its own species. So each angel is has its own essence of its own species, but because you cannot individualize an angel through matter or through the way that we individualize God, the angels must not be part of one big species in the way that we're all humans. They are all their own individual species. I know it's kind of a funky way to think about that, but if you consider what he's saying as far as how we get from a group, humanity at large, to individuals, and that either has to be through matter or we have to be individualized the way God is, which we'll see in a second, that answer actually makes a lot of sense. Okay? And we'll understand more of that when we eventually get to the treatise on the angels. All right, the argument here, and again, via negativa. Matter is in potentiality, God is pure act. We saw that before. The goodness of matter is the goodness of participation because it owes its goodness to form. So the fact that matter can be called good is due to the fact that the form that it is the matter of is good. It is a participated goodness, but God is the ultimate goodness. Therefore, he cannot be composed of participated goodness. Every agent or cause acts based on its form. Since God is the first cause or agent, which we saw in proof 2, he is in essence pure form and not matter. That's kind of a confusing idea, so I included this example here, and I'm taking this from part of what St. Thomas says in the article. Fire heats water when acting according to its form, but in order to do so, fire must be moved from potentiality into actuality. Somebody or something must actualize that fire. God is the first agent, exists in a state of pure actuality, and therefore acts purely according to his form. Pure form precludes matter. So because God is pure act, he is therefore pure form. Pure form cannot be composed with matter. Therefore, God is not composed of matter. We answer our objections. Soul and emotions are attributed to God metaphorically. In the case of emotions, they're given to us by Scripture to help us better understand what God does and why he does it. And then 3, the question of individuality. Receivable forms are individualized by matter. Receivable forms would be something like you or I or your dog or what have you. We all received a form. However, an unreceivable self-subsisting form is individualized by its inability to receive matter. And God, by definition, is an unreceivable form. He has his inability to take on matter, his inability to receive form, because he is pure form, gives him individualization. Okay, again, complex stuff. It's one you might need to sit down and kind of think about a little bit to really grasp it. Whether God is the same as his essence or nature. Now let me just kind of explain what this article is asking. You and I are not the same as essence. You are not humanity in and of itself. You have humanity. As a human being, you possess and participate in humanity, but you are not humanity. Humanity existed long before you. It'll exist long after you. Okay? And the question is that the case with God? Nothing can be in itself. The substance of God, that is the Godhead, that is the essence of God, is said to be inside God. Therefore, he can't be his essence, nature, or substance. A suppositum is distinct from nature, just as man is distinct from humanity, so God is the suppositum of the Godhead, is distinct from the Godhead, his nature. Argument from authority, John 14:6 tells us that God is not only a living thing, but it is life himself, unlike a man who has humanity, and this is the really key idea here. God does not have the Godhead, God is the Godhead. In other words, I am not humanity. I am a man who has humanity, but I am not humanity. God does not have the Godhead. God is the Godhead. He is his essence. That's the distinction. Again, via negativa. In a thing composed of matter and form, you and me, nature must be distinct from a suppositum. This does not hold for something not composed of matter and form, that is individualized not by matter, in this case, God. The previous article demonstrated that God is of the latter type, therefore, God can be his own essence, because he is individualized by not by something other than matter, by his being pure form, and he is not composed of matter and form, therefore his nature doesn't have to be distinct from his suppositum. Objections answered. This confusion results from us necessarily speaking of God, a simple being, as though he were a composite being. In other words, when we speak of God, we use a language that pertains to ourselves. And we have to do that because it's the only way we know how to speak, but it's not accurate of God. This is the via negativa in action right here. We can't quite grasp how God as a simple being is different than us as a composite being, but we can rule out that he is a composite being like us. Created things, that is God's effects, imitate God imperfectly. Hence, in them, the suppositum is not the same as their nature. So you and I imitate God. We have his image, but we don't imitate him perfectly. We are not a perfect imitation of the divine being. All right, then finally, whether essence and existence are the same in God. If God's essence and existence are identical, nothing can be added to him. If this were true, God would be in everything. Pantheism. Holy Scripture refutes this position. In other words, if God was his existence as he is his essence, then wouldn't God be all existence, which would result in pantheism? He would be everything that has existence, or at least in everything that has existence. 2. We can know whether God exists. We proved that back in Article 2, or Question 2, excuse me, but not what he is. We can know his existence, not his essence. Therefore, they must not be identical because we know the one and not the other. And if they were identical, by knowing one, we would know the other. Our argument from authority, St. Hilary tells us that God's existence is subsisting truth, not accidental. It is the same as his essence. Again, we use the via negativa. Whatever anything has, besides its essence, is called in it by something else, or is caused in it by something else. Water has heat because fire gives it heat. So in other words, if God has anything in it, him, besides his essence, that thing, whatever it is, whether it's his existence or something else, must be caused by something else. If the thing's existence is distinct from its essence, that existence must be caused. If a thing's existence is caused, it must be caused by something outside itself. And this cannot be true of God, since according to proof 2, he is the first efficient, uncaused cause. Okay? So again, can we necessarily say something positive about what God is? No, but based on what we've already established, we can say something negative about what he is not. We can rule out the idea that he has a different existence essence, even if we don't understand how those two must be the same. Answering the objections. Reply to number 1, which comes in a couple parts. A being that can have nothing added to it in 2 ways, either because its essence precludes addition or because it does not require addition. God's essence rules out the possibility of anything being added to it. God is of that first type, while existence in general is of the second type. So we're making a distinction between the existence of God and existence at large. That is what helps us to avoid pantheism while still asserting that God's existence and essence are the same. And finally, reply to 2, we only know God's existence by his effect, not as it is his essence. Again, we proved God's existence, but we proved it by examining his effects, not by knowing it in the way that would cause us to know his essence. We know God because we see the things that led us to the 5 proofs. We don't know his essence. Therefore, we don't truly know his existence in the way that objection 2 up here was assuming. That's it for the first 4 articles. I know it's confusing stuff. Please feel free to dig into this. Ask me questions on Facebook. Reply to YouTube comments. I'll do my best to explain anything that's unclear. It is heady. Don't give up, though, on the Summa just because this stuff, it is tough. It's a beautiful thing that St. Thomas is constructing, and it is worth the effort to really try and wrap your mind around some of these tough concepts. So hang in there. We'll get there together. Next time we'll cover Articles 5 through 8 and finish up question 3. Until then, I am Ben DiBono, and thank you for watching.